Live?
Okay, good morning.
Morning. All right, I'm going to assume we're live.
We are live,
great.
and the recording has started.
Great. All right. Thank you so much for joining, Sander. And it's my great pleasure to introduce GIS Speaker Series speaker today, Alexander van Servellen. And Sander is a senior consultant for research intelligence at Elsevier, based in Singapore for 9 years. And he helped develop and launch research analytics capabilities at Elsevier that are now used in SciVal and Elsevier's analytical services. So a lot of the metrics that we are all, I presume, evaluated on as researchers. And he loves using research metrics to tell a story about the research landscape and to help institutions use these analytics responsibly in strategy and evaluation. So Sander he's a developmental psychologist from the University of Amsterdam and has been at Elsevier since 2006. Great to have you on board.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me over. So I appreciate the kind introduction, and it's good to be here, even though it's still virtually. Sometimes this is a good medium to give a talk, and it's being recorded. I believe this is a webinar format, so if you have questions for me, you can put them in the Q&A box. I assume that you all can hear me clearly and you can see my screen. So today, the kind of theme of the presentation is collaboration and research performance. And it will be grounded in research analytics with some focus on A*STAR and specifically the Genome Institute of Singapore. I think as my introduction included, I've been working on research analytics for quite a while. And I moved to Singapore in 2013. Specifically to work on some government tender. So at the time worked quite closely with Singapore NRF to provide a really detailed report of the research performance of Singapore, which helped to inform RIE exercise, right? And more recently, in the last few years, I started to work quite closely with A*STAR at a central level to do an analytical service that looked at the research performance of each of the RIs as well as A*STAR compared to many other, let's say, government research institutes globally. So it's really a pleasure to speak to you today in context of how do we use such analytics to look at collaboration specifically. I think that was the theme that you asked me to explore today. Before we look at that specifically, I want to look at why bother with research analytics? Why did we develop it? Why has it become a popular way to look at certain aspects of strategy and evaluation? We'll look at a lot of examples using A*STAR and GIS. I'll leave time to answer your questions if you have any, so I'll monitor the Q&A box. If based on your questions, it's appropriate to take a live look at some data that I probably didn't include in the presentation, then we'll do that. So I'll try to be a bit flexible. So why research analytics to begin with? Simply using metrics as a proxy for different stages of the research cycle can inform research strategy and evaluation if you do it responsibly. If you break down the research process into, let's say, a planning and an inputs phase, as an input, you could look at obviously funding, the amount of money and resources that are required to initiate the research project, the people. So people work either alone or in groups. Sometimes there's partnerships between institutions, funding, equipment, everything that goes into the research process. And certainly we have the process of doing research, collecting data, everything that's needed to generate maybe the first outputs could be a data set. There could be a preliminary publication. There could be a preprint. Papers could go through peer review and be published in journals, books, conferences. There can be different types of impact. Quite often we're overly focused on citation impact, but there's such a broader spectrum of impact that's possible to measure. So the idea is that for each kind of part of the process and for each type of impact, we at Elsevier and maybe other companies as well, and all of the participants such as A-STAR, universities, NRF, if we all begin to collect high quality data that represent the different outcomes and impacts that ultimately result from the investments in research, right, and the work that we all do, that can feed into a process where we combine this data with human qualitative understanding of what the goals are, what the strategy is, how it aligns with national priorities, to kind of form a narrative that can inform ultimately the strategy going forward. So you can look backwards at what has been done and evaluate, have we done well? Did we succeed in what we sought out to do? But also inform how the strategy for, let's say, the next 5 years can be refined. So the data is not there to replace people. It's not there to metricize everything, but it's there ultimately, ideally, to enable humans to make more fair, evidence-based decisions. Metrics broadly allow us to do things like measure the production of science and benchmarking at multiple levels, monitoring research trends, in line with today's theme, mapping collaboration networks and identifying collaboration opportunities, assessing the international impact of research, identifying the leading organizations and competitors, right? So that also feeds into collaboration, identify who is doing what and with whom in a variety of fields. That's also potentially related to collaboration. As mentioned, impact, we often talk about impact as if citations alone are the whole measurement of impact. And research systems have long been measuring impact using citations because it's easy, right? Citations are readily available in citation databases. From a scientific academic point of view, bibliometrics has clearly found out what citations measure. So it's quite a robust scientific field as well. But if we want to move forward and really tell a meaningful story about what investments in research and doing research, the impact that it actually provides to society, right? We can break impact into a kind of multifaceted concept where we might cover things like academic impact, societal impact, commercial impact, innovation impact, and we begin to collect information that starts to measure at least a part of that, maybe not the whole thing, but for example, if we look at impact on policies, we can look at policy documents from many organizations in the world, like even the World Health Organization, or if they form a policy which is impactful worldwide, and a policy document is citing scientific research, by tracking the linkage between policy documents and research, one can determine that a body of research has influenced policies which have in turn provided some kind of impact to society. Similarly, innovation, you could look at patents, or you can look at citations coming from patents. Could look at how much awareness is there of research in the public domain. Is research being tweeted about? Is it being shared? Is it being mentioned in the news, and so forth? So a lot of this is already being tracked in Scopus. At an individual article level, you can see if a paper has been cited by policy documents or by patents, or if it's been mentioned in the news or in Wikipedia, or if it's been shared on Twitter and Facebook and so forth. Scopus is a great data source for bibliometric, research analytics, basically because it's an incredibly broad content set of peer-reviewed journals, conferences, and books coming from more than 100 countries, 45 different languages, spanning all the different subject areas, 11,000 new papers every day. It's used by the university rankings. It's used by many countries, governments use Scopus to evaluate, including NRF, A-star. So it's a great data source. Not only is it broad and comprehensive, but it's a curated database. So the content that's included is very carefully selected. It's not easy to get a journal into Scopus. And we also reevaluate and remove any content or any journal which no longer meets the criteria to be in Scopus, can be discontinued or removed from Scopus. So it's a curated database, and that's what really sets us apart from something like Google Scholar, which algorithmically indexes all content that is available on the web without curating or making sure that it's not predatory or making sure that there are not other, let's say, quality problems. So Scopus is broad, it's curated, so it's a great source for bibliometrics. The analysis that I showed today is based on SciVal, which is a big data analytics tool that we developed at Elsevier. It uses data from Scopus and many other sources as well. SciVal is used by NRF, it's used by A-star, it's used by NTU, NUS, SMU for research strategy and evaluation. So some of you probably have seen the data. If it's new to you, don't worry. I'm going to try to talk you through it. Data is not meant to be overwhelming. It's meant to help people to tell a story that's meaningful, hopefully actionable, so we can make more sense of what's going on and hopefully tell a story to others about, this is what we did. This is some of the things that we see in the data. It should be interesting and fun. SciVal, a lot of the data comes from Scopus. Ultimately, the goal is to collect lots of different data types that will point together, form a kind of holistic view of research impact. So some of that could even be startups that are associated to research, or policy documents, patents, equipment. So, what if we begin to index equipment as an entity and connect equipment to projects and to papers and to citations and so forth? Open syllabus media, alumni, Twitter. Ultimately, tweeting about stuff has become important, maybe for the right reasons, maybe not for the right reasons. We can debate it. Citations from clinical documents, things like Wikipedia, spin-offs. These are all content types that potentially can point towards the broader spectrum of impact. And that's something we're working on in SciVal, which will take time, but we're thinking big. That's really data source and platform. I don't want to bore you with that too much, but now, the topic today is really looking at collaboration and research performance, which will be grounded in some of these metrics that we find in SciVal. Typically, an analysis used to look at research collaboration is what you can measure with publication data. So we can't measure collaboration that's like, you working with someone or having a conversation that is not formally reflected in the published manuscript. So typically when we use research analytics for looking at collaboration, it's looking at formal co-authorship as noted in the address line, the people information and the affiliation information in the published manuscript. So we look at co-authorship between individuals, so different researchers, but also different institutions as defined by which institutions the people indicate is their affiliated institution on the paper, but also between different countries. You could also do it between different departments if you wish. We can look at the number of papers that are collaborated between different people, institutions, and countries, but we can also look at the relative quality. Today, I'm going to really focus mostly on citation metrics, but as I presented in the previous section, ultimately in the future, you'll be able to look at a lot of different aspects of performance or impact. Today, we are looking mainly at citation metrics, which would be, for example, the number of citations per paper, the field-weighted citation impact, or the number of percentage of papers that are published in the super highest quality journals, let's say the top 10% best journals. Sometimes collaboration analysis could be a network analysis, looking at all the different players who collaborate together and which collaborations provide mutually beneficial outcomes. That's quite a popular approach. So this is the first kind of output that I'm looking at from SciVal, and I'm looking at the entire world of research. So I'm using the world as an entity, and I'm including only the years 2018 to 2021. So it's say a 4-year period, quite recent. And we see worldwide between 2018 and 21, there were, let's say, 14.2 million papers published, and they were cited 87.7 million times. It's hard to tell if that's a lot or little citations, but it is the world level of citations, which we normalize to a level of 1.00. So the metric field-weighted citation impact is meant to make it very easy to determine how a citation level compares to world average. So world average is always set to 1.00, and this has applied a normalization for the difference in citation practices between different fields and document types. So you can see, even though the average is 6.2 citations per paper, the world field-weighted citation impact is 1.00. So always remember that keeps things simple. Now, if I look at the world, again, same years, we see actually that of those papers, 21% of the papers are international collaboration, 33 are national, 32 are institutional, 13.5 are single authorship. So the way that you define this is any paper that has at least one author from a different country is international. Even if 10 people come from the same country and one author comes from a different country, is affiliated to an institution that is in a different country, it's international. And national collaboration means that people, at least one author is from a different institution, but all the authors are affiliated to institutions that come from the same country, right? So that could be authors from A-STAR and from NTU and NUS working together. Institutional collaboration means there's more than one author, but everyone comes from the same institution. So that could be everyone comes from A-STAR, everyone comes from NUS, for example. Single author, pretty simple, it just means there's one author on the paper. Globally, this is worldwide, we see a very clear relationship here that the papers that have at least one author from a different country are cited 50% more than world average. All the other types are cited less than world average. Papers that have at least one author from academia and one from industry are cited 61% more than world average. So we see a clear citation benefit to international collaboration and to academic corporate collaboration. But we are here looking at the most aggregated level. It's all fields of research, all countries, everything put together. It's the whole world. So if we zoom in and we say, let's look at Singapore. Singapore, we see 67% of the papers are international papers. So you see there's a high focus on international collaboration. And that there's a clear advantage in that the internationally collaborated papers are cited 2.15 times world average. Actually, national and institutional collaboration is still cited more than world average, but less than international. Single author papers are cited 20% less than world average. Academic corporate papers are cited 3 times world average, but the volume is a lot lower than the international papers, right? So you can say the finding that we see at the world level is also present looking at Singapore data. Let's look at A-star. So this is A-star as a whole. So that's entire SERC and BMRC together, all research RIs together. Similar to Singapore, kind of, right? You see 64% of the papers have at least one author from a different country. The citation impact there is 2.21, so higher than national and institutional collaboration. Also, we see the single author papers cited less than world average. Academic corporate collaboration are cited the most, but again, it's a smaller share of total articles than international collaboration. So will more collaboration lead to a higher overall citation impact? So let me know what you think. Is that true? If you have any thoughts about whether collaborating more and perhaps internationally collaborating more will lead to higher citation impact either for yourself or for your RI. Feel free to leave any comments in the chat or ask any questions in the Q&A box.
And do you want to take questions as you go, or do you want to take questions?
Well, I think it's more like an open question. Do you think that more collaboration will lead to a higher citation impact for a university or for an RI or for a manuscript, or is it anything that anyone has an opinion about? Then they could fill it in the chat. And if everyone's shy, I'm just going to continue and we'll take questions at the end. It's no problem either way.
Usually we do questions at the end. And so
all right. I'll just move on. So
if that's okay.
Someone says not really checking on citations. That's fine. So again, I'm talking a lot about citations today, talking about research analytics. So I'll look at a couple of findings here. So
if I can interject one comment, Sandra, about the point you made, the collaborations giving you higher citations. There's the number of citations is multifactorial, I guess, right? It's whether you collaborate or not, whom you collaborate with. It's also the size of the team. Larger team means more work and usually better citations. It's the amount of funding. So an industry collaboration may be more well-funded than something that's not. The collaboration and international collaboration may be more well-funded than something that's national. If you have many more authors, that means, the self-citations can also push you up a bit. I guess for all these metrics, right, I think people will be curious to know their multifactorial nature and what can you assign causality to?
Yeah, no, that's exactly kind of the idea that I wanted to open up, because if you look in the data, right, you can see a collaboration, a positive correlation. For example, I picked here a number of universities spanning different types of countries, right? So some of them are from Indonesia, Thailand, Holland, Australia, Singapore, but also a number of institutes. And basically the y-axis is the percentage of their papers that have at least one international co-author. And the x-axis is the field-weighted citation impact, where we know the world average is 1. So, just doing that on a broad level, I think you can kind of plot a very simplistic correlation. Now, I didn't calculate this, right? So I just drew this in. So, if this offends you, my apologies. But the point being that you can quite often see a relationship between how much a particular entity collaborates, the percentage of their papers that are international, at least one international co-author, and the citation impact. There may be other factors involved. So I think that's exactly what we want to think about. What if we look at A-star's RIs in BMRC? And again, the x-axis is the field-weighted citation impact of the RI overall for their papers published between 2018 and 2021. And the y-axis is the percentage of papers that have at least one international co-author. And there's not a perfect relationship here, but I feel like it's not a linear line, but you can kind of see some relationship here with a couple of outliers. So that there's is quite often when we look at this, a relationship between collaboration and citation impact, and what the causality is and the other factors is a great conversation, because it's not quite as simple as you would put in a model where there's just one predictor. So there are many academic studies that look at international co-authorship as an indicator, and look at the relationship between international collaboration and visibility, impact, quality, productivity of research. So there's a lot of reading that you can do. It's quite nerdy bibliometric stuff. My own theories, which are kind of hard to empirically test and prove. But my own theories about this are that collaboration might introduce a diversity of ideas, background, pooling of resources that altogether contribute to a higher quality manuscript, which can then target a high quality journal, be more likely to get more citations. In some cases, collaboration gives access to rare equipment. So if you look in high energy physics, you have maybe 1,000 authors working together because they have to work together to use this very rare equipment, and those papers are often extremely highly cited. So depending on how you count those citations, if you said that, well, every author gets all of the citations from the paper, which is what we call whole counting, then there's certainly a citation benefit. If you apply fractional counting, so if you divide a paper by the number of authors, then having a lot of authors on a paper kind of dilutes the value of the citation. So again, it depends which method you use for counting citations, but we do whole counting. More authors on a paper can also, through a network effect, reach a wider audience of potential citers. So quite often researchers have an audience of people who follow them, who read their work, are more likely to cite them. So if you have a group of authors working together, especially if they don't work, if their audience are not overlapping people, but they work in different places, then that kind of network effect can broaden the audience and potential citations. Collaborating with prominent people. So if you are not yourself, maybe not the most prominent researcher in the world, or maybe you are, and you happen to be able to collaborate with authors who are also very prominent, or perhaps even more prominent, then they might bring with them the sense of reputation, but also their the audience of people that follow them. As well as maybe opening the door to publish in high elite journals. I've heard sometimes top experts can group together to secure funding that would be more difficult to secure on your own. So these are some of the thoughts that I have. If you have any thoughts, feel free to fill it in. I see in the Q&A, my dear Rupa. Hello, Rupa. Yes, it depends on the reputation and institute of the author. Good point. So it can depend. So again, I think that collaboration in and of itself, just collaborating, isn't necessarily improving things, right? So the idea is collaborating with the right people might help produce a better manuscript that becomes more highly cited. Certainly, looking through the data, you can see that there is this very strong, robust effect, right? So if we do look at whether we look at at the level of A star, right, the international collaborations are more highly cited than other forms of collaboration. If we look at these institutions, we see that the ones that have a higher share of papers that are internationally collaborated tend to be more highly cited overall. So it's not just their international papers that are more highly cited, but their overall citation impact is higher. And you see, to some degree, that same effect at the RIs at BMRC. If I take a step back from looking only at collaboration. We look at the Genome Institute of Singapore in SciVal. I've taken the same period from 2018 to 2021, and this is based on papers that mention clearly have the affiliation Genome Institute of Singapore in the paper. So for that quite short period of years, we see 823 papers that were cited, 48% more than world average. Being published in journals across biochemistry, medicine, multidisciplinary, which is journals like Science and Nature and so forth, chemistry, immunology, and physics, neuroscience. So you see, you publish in quite a few different categories of journal. Looking at the keywords that are mentioned in the titles and abstracts of the papers, the top keywords were genome-wide association, epigenetics, breast neoplasms, genomics, transcriptomics, Singapore ancestry, single cell RNA sequence. So these are directly extracted from the abstracts and titles of the papers that are these 123 papers. If we compare GIS to the other RIs, and I included two other benchmarks, so that's A* as a whole as well as Singapore as a whole. And then I've ranked them only on the field-weighted citation impact. So you can see that the infectious disease lab actually has the highest citation impact, but it's just 40 papers, right? You have Singapore Immunology Network, 737 papers, impact of 3.72. It's very, very impressive. And here you have the Genome Institute, 823, citation impact of 2.48. You see some of the bigger RIs are here, like the Institute for Molecular Biology and Cell Biology has impact that's lower. A* as a whole, 11,000 papers, the impact is about 1.94. Singapore, 100,000 papers, impact is about 1.86. So that kind of contrasting can show you, give you some insight into, how high is the citation impact of our entity. And again, I'm not a big fan of only looking at citations, but this is the most readily available and readily used information, both at the Singapore level. NRF, A* itself are looking at a lot of metrics like field-weighted citation impact and what percentage of our papers do we publish in the top 10% best journals. It's also a very popular metric being used in Singapore. So that's why I'm using it. I'm sure that the way we use metrics and which metrics we use in the coming years will evolve. But today we're very focused on citation-based metrics. Looking at GIS, a couple of metrics, we see the publication output kind of went up from 2018 to 2019. 2020, it went down. And then 2021, it went up. So there's some fluctuation. How much you publish in the top 10% journals went down from 2018 to 2020, and then it went up in 2021. So we see 2021 seemed to have been a year of some improvement. The percentage of your papers that were extremely highly cited has fluctuated. The field-weighted citation impact in 2018 was incredibly high, 4 times world average, and it went down and fluctuated a bit. So my bet is in 2018, you published some very highly cited papers, which pushed the average citation level up, which then normalized afterwards. Because I think if you look at 2019, 2020, those are not low citation levels. They're near 2 times world average citation level. It's just compared to 2018, it's lower. At a level of 800 papers in a 4-year period, you can get an outlier effect where a handful of very highly cited papers can push the average up. So therefore, it's important to look at multiple indicators when assessing the quality of research over time. Quartiles. So if we break up the 27,000 journals that are in Scopus, and we measure them based on a journal metric site score, and we look at the top 25% best journals, the second, quartile 1, quartile 2, quartile 3, quartile 4. You can see that GIS impressively publishes more than 82% of its papers in Q1 journals, 10% in Q2, 5% in Q3, and less than 2.5% in Q4. How does that look in terms of quality? Well, on the left, you have the number of papers per year. So you can see GIS published mostly in quartile 1 journals. You see Q2, Q3, and Q4 here at the bottom. On the right is the field-weighted citation impact of each of those categories. So you can see publishing in the Q1 journals brings you very high citations, over 2 times world average, while publishing in all the other quartiles, actually the citations you've received are less than world average for all of the other quartiles. So it shows a very clear citation advantage of getting a manuscript accepted into a quartile 1 journal. And the factors to get into the quartile 1 journal might be, might in part be related to collaboration. The impact of collaboration might be based on pooled funding, resources. You would know better than me. It's the data doesn't tell you all the reasons. It simply shows you the outcome, right? Looking at GIS, same kind of theme, right? So you see that the 639 papers that have at least one international co-author were cited 2.7, almost 2.8 times world average. The other collaboration forms are cited less, but still much more than world average. So that's really awesome that even the single author papers are cited like 68% more than world average. So that shows that you don't rely only on international collaboration when you work within A-star, or even people doing papers without other co-authors are getting a really, quite decent, far above world average citation impact. So that shows, again, you have a lot of expertise in-house to not have to rely on working with others necessarily. Academic corporate collaboration, so the papers that you have at least one co-author from industry are extremely highly cited, 4.3 times world average. It's a handful of papers. It's 27% of your papers. So it's actually quite a big handful for your RI. Looking at the institutions that you co-author with, so obviously A-star, there's a lot of collaboration within A-star, NUS, Duke University in the United States, NTU, MOH Holdings, National Cancer Center, Imperial College London, Harvard, and so forth. So you can see both in terms of the second column here is the percentage of papers published in the top 1% best journals. So these are the super elite journals, right? And the third column is the field-weighted citation impact. So you can see publishing with Duke brings an impact of 3.6, or Imperial College London, Harvard, the papers are cited almost 8 times world average level. So you can see there's some really great outcomes of collaborating with those institutions. And on the right, we have the top 10 collaborations with industry. At the very top is MOH Holdings, but number 2 is Novo Nordisk. Just 26 papers, but the impact is almost 14 times world average. The 7 papers collaborated with AstraZeneca, impact of almost 40 times world average. Again, you would yourself know more about these collaborated papers and what they're about and what factors contribute to these papers being highly cited. But this is what we see in the data. We can break down research into 95,000 topics. So we do this by grouping papers together based on direct citation clustering. So if we break down research into 95,000 clusters and then build those clusters into 1,500 topic clusters, we can look at GIS and see that you're active in a number of different topic clusters, ranging from genome, neoplasms, chromatin, histones, genome-wide association study, micro RNAs, breast neoplasms, and some of these topics are incredibly highly cited, some for you. So for example, the 28 papers published related to microRNAs are cited 11 times world average. If we go down from the 1500 level to the 95,000 level, we see that there's some very highly cited papers that you've produced related to exomes and extracellular vesicles, familial breast cancer. You have to remember that the world average citation level is 1. So, these are areas in which you're extremely highly cited. And I wanted to look at just one of these areas, which is extracellular vesicles and exomes at a world level. So you can see, stepping back to look at the whole world, it's about 11,000 papers cited 2 times world average. We see it's a very prominent topic. So that means it's being published in top journals. It's likely to have a lot of funding available in this topic currently. And if we look at the world level, we see it's dominated by a handful of Chinese, American, French institutions. In Singapore, A*STAR produces less than NUS, but is incredibly impactful at 10 times world average. So you're getting a lot of citations. There's some corporates like AstraZeneca, MOH Holdings, active in this, publishing papers in this area. We see the top medical institution is from my home country, the UMC, University Medical Center of the University of Amsterdam, is active in this area. We can see who the top researchers are specifically in this area. Again, so if you wanted to reach out to people to collaborate, or even maybe recruit people who are super active and impactful in this area, these are the top 10 in the world, and you can see how much how highly cited they are, particularly in this area. So I think the person here stands out, Mr. Kenneth Whitwer from Johns Hopkins. We can also see which journals are publishing a lot in this area. So this area related to exomes and extracellular vesicles, microRNA, the International Journal of Molecular Studies, 470 papers, but they're only cited 18% more than world average, while the 268 papers published in the Journal of Extracellular Vesicles cited 4.9 times. So that could help to guide, if you're active in a specific field, which journal is the best fit, by looking not at the overall impact of the journal, but looking specifically at the impact of the papers belonging to a particular topic in that journal. So back to the topic of collaboration, if we look at some of these topics, these different topics that GIS is active in, do we find a relationship between international collaboration and GIS's impact in those topics? And the answer is no. Here we don't see a relationship. So the relationship might hold true at an institutional level, that institutions and groups that collaborate more tend to get a higher citation impact. But at a topic level, you see that that relationship doesn't hold true. So the topics in which you collaborate more that aren't necessarily more highly cited, suggesting that there are many other factors that determine whether publishing in a particular topic will lead to highly cited articles. So that's all the data that I had to show. My kind of closing remarks are that today's analysis it's not comprehensive, it's not exhaustive, it's just meant to offer some food for thought in terms of how you can use research analytics to tell a story. I believe that you have more answers, right? So again, it takes human beings that understand the concepts, the context, understand the input, understand the field, understand the goals, to make sense of this data and use it responsibly. We do see there's a very strong relationship between collaboration and citation impact at a country, institution level, but often not at a subject or a topic level. I think I mentioned already, it's up to you to understand which collaborations make sense and for what reasons, what collaboration partner, as an individual institution, can add value to a project that might help to secure funding, might be a prominent researcher, or might introduce new equipment, new methods, and ultimately produce a better manuscript, maybe find a wider audience. The data can only point you in the right direction, maybe give you some tips as to who's doing what, but it's up to you to really figure out what the best thing is. A-Star has access to SciVal, so I believe that each RI's impact manager has access. These people are thinking hard about how to use such data in a helpful and constructive way. So I think it's up to all of us to kind of think together, how can we use this data to everyone's benefit? Questions are very welcome. I think looking at this data, you don't have to be an expert in one day. I think the analytics are ultimately there to tell a story, to help inform you. It's not there to scare you or overwhelm you. So that's really what I had. If you have questions or comments, they're really welcome. I'm just gonna quickly open the Q&A box and have a look. Did COVID have an impact on GIS scholarly output, citation impact? Curious, because the data presented is 2018 to 2021. Good question. So I'm gonna just jump to SciVal, and maybe we'll look at GIS specifically, and look at let's look at a 12-year period, maybe. Give it a moment to load. It's always when you do things live that you can get embarrassed with loading times, but let me move to here to GIS. I see overall some fluctuation in years. I do feel like 2020, the number of publications clearly went down. So that could be related to COVID. It's hard for me to determine whether there was less activity, less funding, and so forth. I think you do see a blip in the data. I think if we look at more institutions, perhaps, so these are the different RIs. So you see that the Genome Institute, this is a number of papers, right? So you see the Genome Institute has had fluctuations over the years, and whether the fluctuation here, what happened due to COVID, it's unclear. Yeah, so I can't answer that. I don't see it in the data. I can't really answer that question clearly. You would have to look at whether you see a significant difference. Usually there's a lag of about 2 years, right? So if something happens in an ecosystem, there's policy or there's funding changes, it takes time to for that to be measurable in terms of publications and citations. So it often takes more than a year, maybe 2 years to read the effect in the data. Any other questions?
Thanks, Andrew. I don't know if you got the question from Jay Shin Q&A about consortium papers.
How do you define a consortium paper?
All right, maybe I'll try to define it for Jay. Like say the International Cancer Genome Consortium or International Human Epigenomics Consortium, Human Cell Atlas. So these consortia, they might do packages, right? So you have 30 papers from GTEx published all together in one group of journals within 1 week. So that's the classic consortium paper package.
I don't think we automatically create such an entity in SciVal, right? So in this type of data, you've got ready-made entities and you can customize it. So I've, for example, pulled in data representing the RIs. Now, if you have within RIs different funding streams, different programs that are resulting in different clusters of articles, such as a consortium, you can load that in as a data set. So if you, for example, had the if you had the DOIs of the papers, the resulting papers, you could load them in and then you could see exactly how highly cited they are, and you could analyze them compared to other groups of papers, right? But that I can't set that up now because I don't know which papers have resulted from a particular consortium or a particular program. But you can yourselves do that, right? So it's pretty easy to have all the papers of the RI, but to break that down by project or into different things is perfectly possible. If you have the DOIs of the resulting papers, or if you have the researchers that worked on stuff, there's different ways to customize this. And then quite simply, you would be able to plot all of the same metrics for that subgroup of your papers and understand the aspects that we looked at.
That's great. Actually, that relates to another question I wanted to ask, a very practical one. All the very fascinating metrics you showed here, are they, in principle, if someone in GIS has access to SciVal, are they readily available, or do they need to do a certain amount of work to build up those metrics, or they're just there?
No, they're just there. So if we come into SciVal, I could teach them to load in the RI data, but once it's there, you can pretty much see everything, right? So we can look at GIS and see which topics you're active in. So you see GIS is active in a lot of topics across different fields. These are related to medicine, these are related to bioscience, these are even some of the harder sciences, and you can see exactly which ones are very highly cited. Chromatin and immunoprecipitation histone code is cited almost 7 times world average. All of that's there. You can go and look globally at any of these areas and explore them. So you see this area is growing very fast. It's impactful. You can see it's related to all of these terms here, and we can see exactly who are the top institutions that we might consider to partner with. You can see America is very strong. You can see is industry publishing in this area, and you can see that they are. All of this data is readily available. You just need to kind of configure it a little bit so that you're not looking at all of A*, but you're looking at your RI. But all of the metrics then are just standard different reports that you're looking at. And my job is to teach people, support you in figuring out which data points are helpful to you, because there's a lot here, right? It can be difficult to come here and understand what's relevant to me, right? So it's kind of the work that I do is help to together with you understand what you're trying to do and give a little bit of guidance on what information might help you do that better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great. Actually, I'm sure most of the people in the audience have not seen such metrics before, so we're going to hound institutional rep after.
Yeah, so
that's very exciting.
That's nice. So here we see this really specific topic related to chromatin immunoprecipitation, right? So we see the top authors in the world, but we can also look at who are the top authors in Singapore, for example. So in Asia, I might use a country filter, look at. Right, there's the collaborators, but yeah, these are the people that are active in this area at A*, at NUS. So it's pretty, all the data, all the author, all the profiles are there for the authors, all the profiles for all the institutions are there, all the metrics are there. So you can select which metric you want to use. So if you are very interested in understanding how much someone publishes in, how much do people publish in the top 1% journals, if that's important to you, right? You want to work together with someone that gets into those top journals. You say, all right, well, one of you got 33% of the papers were in top journals. But yeah, you can configure this. It's pretty straightforward.
That's fascinating. Very useful. Want to get to a couple of other quick questions?
Sure.
Okay, one thing that always confused me about the FWCI, the field-weighted citations in papers, and I have an FWCI of 5 or 7 or whatever. Then I publish an 11th paper that doesn't get cited at all. Is if I'm not mistaken, it'll just drag my FWCI down, right?
Yes, it's an average. So if you use an FWCI on a low number of papers, then one paper that receives 0 citations can pull the average down a lot, or one paper that's very highly cited will raise it. So the advice is never to base evaluation decisions on one metric. So knowing that field-weighted citation impact is incredibly sensitive to outliers when you have a small number of papers, it's important to use other indicators, maybe something that's not citation based, like the quality of the journal that your paper is published in. But always when evaluating individuals, it's super important to pull in, qualitative aspects. It cannot all be data driven. Inevitably, there will be some sense of looking at the number of papers and citations, but it should be balanced with other factors.
Yeah, that's why in evaluations, people look at recommendation letters, prizes, committees, it's quite holistic for sure. Nevertheless, you probably know this, but FWCI is used as a thresholding, as a hard filter in some evaluations and funding decisions. So yeah, you see, you guys have a lot of prominence. But I wonder would it be possible to come up with a metric? So intuitively, right? Publishing 11 papers is better than publishing 10 papers.
So your voice is breaking up a little bit.
Publishing 10 or so. Every newspaper. Yeah, so sorry, maybe my network is bad. So what I'm saying is, it should not be, is it possible to devise a metric where you always go forwards when you publish, and the quality of the paper decides how much forward you go, how much your metric improves? Like a paper should never push a metric down.
H-index, I think, is there, right?
So value, right?
I think the H-index is there as a metric which only goes up, and it's a combination of productivity and quality. H-index is also kind of linked with this, how long someone's been working. So it's pretty hard to get an H-index of 95 if you haven't published, right? Because the person has to have at least 95 papers. I think our advice is really to use multiple metrics to get a holistic story. If you have a great idea for a metric that would work, yeah, look at it. I mean, we're always interested in trying to align with the research community globally on what metrics are, and then working with bibliometricians maybe to test some of these metrics and see if there's enough acceptance from both the academic bibliometric point of view as well as the practical point of view that universities and governments would be comfortable to actually use that's kind of the challenge that we have, is that we have a lot of ideas, million options, but we have to ground our decisions in what people feel would be let's say, responsible from an academic bibliometric point of view and practically would be used. But we have a lot of metrics, like we have really a ton of metrics. And if you were to look, we've got metrics of how many times things are viewed. We've got lots of different citation-based metrics with options, right? So you can.
Sorry to cut you off. I wanted to get to one last question, but
sure.
A comment that your message of use many metrics, don't use just one, is very well taken, and we will try to convey this message to our funders who sometimes use only one single metric. And I will cite you when we convey that message.
Feel free. I've worked with NRF before, and I know that they're very focused on in Singapore. Everyone's become very focused on field-weighted citation impact and percentage of papers published in the top 10% journals. Potentially, there are other metrics you could add, and I think again you need to balance multiple metrics as well as looking at how you can add the qualitative element to it.
Absolutely. One last quick question. I know we're out of time, but if you don't mind.
Sure.
Citation metrics, currently, they don't distinguish between, a middle author and a lead author or a senior author. Eh,
Correct.
And of course, last author means different thing. In physics, last author means you did the least work. In biology, last author means you're the senior author. So it really depends on the field. But still, within one field, wouldn't it be better to consider authorship position, these metrics? Because otherwise, there are people who can get middle authorship in 20 in last
yeah. So
paper.
that's something we're working on. We want here you have a filter to look at for individuals. You can look at only the papers where they're first author or corresponding author, if you wish. And we haven't done that at an institutional level. I believe we will do it at an institutional level, and I think it's important to do. I know that A-Star was very focused when we did a report for the higher management of A-Star. They wanted to really look at first whether the papers that you have published where your authors are first or corresponding author compared to in different positions, to understand which research have you been leading, or do you lead a lot of research, or are you like participants in research that other institutions are leading? So they found that very important to understand when you are first or corresponding author, when you're not, and how that relates to quality and so forth. We're trying to make that a little bit easier, but it's going to take time. But at an individual level, you can do it for the author. So if you want to look at yourself, at your papers, and look at the metrics only where your papers, you are the first corresponding author, you can do that by using this filter here.
Fantastic, and very excited to learn that it's a work in progress, that we can look forward to new metrics that take authorship position into account. With over time, so yeah, there's many more questions that I unfortunately didn't have time to get to, but thank you so much, Sander. This is very useful, and I think it gives people a much better perspective of how to look at research and how to evaluate research. To have you with us in person at some point.
It'd be great to visit you sometime. I do live in Singapore, so it's not far, and glad to be here, and hope it was informative, and we can keep in touch. You can email me. My email is here. You can link with me on LinkedIn if that's something that interests you. I will share the slides with you, the PDF of the slides, and this is being recorded. I already signed the waiver that you can put the recording online, or if that's what you wish to share it internally.
Perfect. Really appreciate your time.
Okay.
Thank you once again.
Okay. Well, take care, everyone.